The Atlanta Braves very clearly chose floor over ceiling with their ads this winter. Was that the right move? Welcome on in to Braves Today for Friday, December 26th. This is your source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're probably part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app or go to FanDuel.com to get started. It's very clear that rather than adding one big bat, the Braves decided, and by Braves, I mean Alex Anthopoulos in the front office, decided to reinforce multiple different weaknesses on the roster. And I kind of want to look at each path and discuss whether or not that was the right decision. Because when you look at things right now, Atlanta has taken care of a lot of their weaknesses, but they've definitely raised the floor of the lineup, the roster, but they haven't raised the ceiling. They haven't added a superstar. So let's break this down and kind of discuss both of these outcomes, because I feel like the ultimate issue for both the 2024 and the 2025 Atlanta Braves were injuries. That wasn't the only issue, right? Guys underperformed, but hear me out here. In 2024, we absolutely know the story by now. Per OptaStats, no other MLB team had ever made the playoffs in a season where they lost 3 opening day starters for the final 35 plus games of the regular season. OptaStats was using Spencer Strider, Ronald Acuna Jr., and Austin Riley when they calculated that stat. That obviously undersells Atlanta's injuries in 2024. Michael Harris missed 60 days. Ozzie Albies missed 70. AJ Minter missed 82. Chris Sale missed the final 2 weeks of the season and wasn't available for the wild card round. And the reason that Atlanta made it into the postseason was because of their rotation and their pitching staff in general. The lineup was decimated. If you remember, at different points down the stretch in 2024, the Braves had multiple players starting for them, 1/3 of their lineup made up of guys who had been DFA'd, right? Whit Merrifield playing second base, Gio Urshela playing third base, Ramon Laureano playing in the outfield. And then they traded for Jorge Soler, and there were times they had him in right field. So 4/9 of their lineup at times were guys who were acquired through the season as players went down. But the rotation had the best ERA in baseball. I'm sorry, not the rotation. The pitching staff had the best ERA in baseball. And both of them were a top 3 or 4 unit by ERA. And they backed into the postseason literally on game 162, played on Monday because of the doubleheader with the Mets and everything. The pitching staff is what carried Atlanta into the postseason. That and an MVP caliber season from Marcell Ozuna. And then in 25, they didn't have the safety of the rotation, right? Yes, they lost Austin Riley to a second consecutive season-ending injury. Sean Murphy went down to that hip issue that's been bothering him for 3 years. But we all know the story by now in 2025. Atlanta had all 5 opening day starters on the 60-day injured list at the same time. First time that's ever happened in MLB history. And they just didn't have, the offense wasn't good enough. Yes, guys were underperforming, right? Guys were hitting below their potential. We're dealing with slumps and with struggles. And so there wasn't enough remaining performance when your rotation was decimated for the Braves to make it to the postseason or even to make it to a winning record, right? it's very clear in both of those situations that, like, yes, underperformance was a problem, but the injuries were the bigger issue, right? Because we saw Atlanta in 24 overcome the injuries to make the postseason because they had great performance from the rotation and the bullpen. And in 25, they had rotation injuries and poor performance in the bullpen, and the lineup couldn't carry the weight, right? Austin Riley was hitting below his career norms. Ronald Acuna Jr. got nicked up in the second half. Matt Olson wasn't hitting for the same power. Marcell Ozuna collapsed. Like, the underperformance did not help things, but the injuries are ultimately what it felt like the biggest issue was. And it's very clear that the Braves, at least in some respects, feel the same. I remember listening to an earnings call for, I think it was quarter three, and listening to Terry McGurk mention the injuries as one of the reasons they're hopeful about 2026. And so it's very clear that what Atlanta did was they said, we're going to address a lot of that. And one of the things that the Braves have done is build the best bench that I think they've had under Alex Anthopoulos. He's talked about this before. He's talked about how difficult it is to build a bench in Atlanta. And I went through all of my recordings, my voice recorder on my phone, what I've saved to the computer. I couldn't find the exact quote, but I remember AA talking about it's just so hard to commit playtime to anybody that you're trying to sign in free agency. It's too hard. It's so hard to commit to them getting whatever amount of playing time that Atlanta definitely does not get everybody's. Let me rephrase this. I'm not wording this right. Atlanta's odds of getting guys are lower than equivalent teams. If the money and everything is equal, bench pieces will go somewhere else because there's a path to more playing time there than there is in Atlanta. A secret about MLB players that I'm sure if you think about it, you all know is they're incredibly competitive. And a lot of the guys who accept a bench role want to do more. They want to see, like, yes, I'm starting off the season as a bench player, but there's a path to playing time here, right? Here's what I could do to become the starter. And in Atlanta, you don't have that. They're not going to bench Ronald Acuna Jr. for an outfielder. They're not going to bench Austin Riley or Matt Olson. Like, these guys have played 162 or tried to so often that you don't even get like rotational at bats. Think back about how many guys you've seen play at least, 162. Matt Olson's done it every season since he was acquired. 22, 23, 24, 25. Marcell Ozuna did it in 2024. Dansby Swanson did it in 2022. You look at guys who have played 157 games or more. Austin Riley did it for 3 straight years in that time span, 21, 22, 23. Ronald Acuna Jr. did it in 2023. Orlando Arcia did it in 2024. And Ozzie Albies did it in 21 and 25. Like, this roster normally, barring injuries, has an everyday player at just about every position, but in the past, left field and catcher, right? They famously had a platoon in 23, Eddie Rosario and Kevin Pillar, right? Like, they frequently platoon guys in left field because they haven't had a full-time guy, and they see Jurickson Profar now as a full-time guy. There's just not playing time. And so Atlanta's bench under AA in recent years has been, I'm not going to say embarrassing, because who's embarrassed about a bench, but it's just been underwhelming. Let's put it that way. 2022, Alex Dickerson and Orlando Arcia. I believe I saw this right, that Alex Dickerson is now already a coach. Alex Dickerson's not playing right now. I believe he's now into coaching already. I could be wrong. It may be somebody else, but I thought it was Alex Dickerson. Anyway, he spent all of 2023 and 24 immediately after leaving Atlanta out of MLB. 23, he played with the Long Island Ducks of the Independent League. 2024, he played in Japan. He played Atlantic League Baseball again last year. And right now, he's playing winter ball in Puerto Rico. Like, he's not a major leaguer. He hasn't been a major leaguer since he left Atlanta. 2023, Hire Adrianza, Sam Hilliard. Okay. 2024, Luis Guillorme and Forrest Wall. 2025, Nick Allen and Eli White. Like, those were your top bench options in the last couple seasons. Yes, Arcia in 22 became the starter in 23. Yes, Nick Allen in 25 became the starter. Eli White, quasi-starter, and he's going to probably play a big role in the 26 Atlanta Braves. But it's not like an incredibly threatening or dangerous bench. You're really kind of counting on guys to play every day in those seasons. But right now, for 2026, Atlanta's bench looks like Mauricio Dubon, who can play elite defense anywhere on the field, career 113 OPS plus against lefties. You've got Mike Yastrzemski, career 110 OPS against righties, can play above average defense at all three outfield spots. And it's a career 110 for Yastrzemski. He's gotten better in recent seasons. Like, it's been even better recently than it is in his career. Eli White, who AA has said before can play all three outfield spots, quote, at a near Gold Glove level. And last year, 10 homers, 10 stolen bases, and 271 plate appearances. Like, he was on pace had he played a full season for at least 2020, if not 25-25. And then your last man on the bench is either Vidal Brujan, formerly a top prospect at shortstop, or Brett Wisely, who both these guys have played shortstop, second base, they've played outfield, they've played all over the field. And everybody just kind of has given the job to Brujan, by the way. I think Wisely has a decent shot to get this. But, like, that's the absolute best bench that I think Atlanta's had under Alex Anthopoulos. Definitely since 2020, like 2021, right? The absolute best bench you've had, because Dubon can be, they were going to trust him to be an everyday player, and now he's a super utility. Yastrzemski is very, very good at the thing that he does, but defensively, he's also sound. And so anytime you face a righty on the mound, you're probably going to have Yastrzemski in the lineup somewhere. White, fastest player on the team. He can play all three in outfield spots. He played some second base in 24. He played some first base in 25. Like, he's training to be a super utility guy. And then that last player, Brujan or Wisely, for now, they could grab somebody else for that last spot. But tons of experience. Neither one of them is that good offensively, but ton of experience anywhere on the field gives you a lot of versatility. In just a second, let's talk about the alternative, right? How Atlanta could have approached the offseason instead. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby. Let's talk about what Atlanta could have done instead. And if you want more on this, I wrote over 2,000 words on this. I believe it was for Monday's newsletter over at bravestoday.com. Again, free or paid. Go check it out. That's where I kind of went into much deeper depth here on that. But, like, you look at this bench, you look at what Atlanta did. They built a very strong bench. You can see in platoon situations where you're going to use certain guys, right? When Sean Murphy is back, which AA finally confirmed what I talked about in September, that he's not expected back for opening day. But when Murphy, or he might not be back, but when Murphy's back, you can see where, like, Baldwin's your primary DH against lefties. Yastrzemski gets into the lineup against righties, and somebody like Jurickson Profar or Ronald Acuna Jr. gets some time at DH in those situations, because Yastrzemski can play both. And if they get to a point where they want to give Michael Harris a break against a tough lefty, they can put Dubon in center field, right? They can rotate a lot more. But what a lot of this does is this raises the floor. It doesn't push the ceiling higher. It doesn't raise the roof, to use the old expression from 15 years ago, because you didn't replace Marcell Ozuna, and you didn't replace his production. He wasn't good last year, which was part of the problem with the 25 Atlanta Braves. But in 23 and 24 together, 79 home runs, 204 RBI, an OPS plus of 148. Ozuna's pretty clear he's not coming back. And so your options to replace that production that you didn't have last year is not, you're not counting on the platoon of Dubon and Yastrzemski in left field to do that for you. Like, that's not where you're getting this improvement. You're getting this improvement from Ronald Acuna Jr. being healthy for 162 games, from a former home run king and Matt Olson getting back into the high 30s and 40s and maybe even 50s with home runs again. You're counting on Austin Riley being the old Austin Riley, the one that finished in, 5th place for MVP voting, 6th place, 7th place. He had 3 consecutive seasons where he was either a 6th or 7th place finisher for MVP, 21, 22, and 23. He had a 135 OPS plus with a combined 108 home runs, 36 a year in that span, and 297 RBI, 99 in that span. He's not been that guy in the last 2 years. Part of it is injuries, right? He's missed a bunch of time. He played 110 games in 24 and 102 in 25. But even outside of the injuries, he wasn't pacing to be that guy. You combine his stats the last 2 years, his per 162 game pace in those 2 seasons was 26 home runs, 84 RBI, with 188 strikeouts, which would have been a career high for him. And so, improvement to the performance and the record and everything. Yes, Yastrzemski, Dubon, those kind of guys, Kim at short, they're going to help raise the floor. But to get back to the amazing and threatening Atlanta Braves who win the division and contend for 90 wins and dig a deep run in the postseason, you're going to need Riley. You're going to need Acuna. You're going to need Olson to do their own stuff, to do their things. You're going to need them to be the guys they're capable of being. And Anthopoulos approached this offseason very clearly with the thought, that's what we're going to do. We're going to set the team up around those guys so that if they perform like they're capable of doing, because we've seen it from every single one of them, this is not just speculation and us hoping that we can get these guys to that level. They've all been that level in the past. They've done this. If we can get them back to that level, combined with guys like Drake Baldwin, who hit 274 with an 810 OPS, was a 126 OPS plus last year, 80 RBI, and 19 home runs in 446 plate appearances. He paced a 25 homer, 100 RBI season despite being a part-time player. If Atlanta can get those guys back to where they are, the ceiling of this team is a lot higher. And you can kind of see how, your options when you think about this. Option one was those, and it's clearly what Atlanta went with, is those guys are going to determine how successful the team is, not adding a single guy. Would adding a Cody Bellinger completely change the ceiling of the Atlanta Braves? Not if those guys do what they did last year or 2 years ago. Not if those guys don't do what they do. We've seen this before. Marcell Ozuna, the 2024 Atlanta Braves, he was 4th place finisher for MVP. He hit 302. He had a 154 OPS plus. He had 39 home runs. He had 104 RBI. They just pitched around him. He was walked what was then a career high 74 times. And it took the pitching staff having a 120 ERA plus and a league best 349 ERA to get them to the postseason, dragging them to the postseason. Because one threat in your lineup, you can work around that. So, even if you added somebody, if you added a Buxton or a Bellinger, if the rest of the stars don't perform, then it doesn't necessarily matter. And it's clear that's kind of the route that AA took. There's another line of thinking here, right? The other line of thinking is that adding the right superstar bat could help those other guys perform better, right? Don't add somebody like a Kyle Schwarber or Pete Alonso who's going to be using the DH spot every day, right? Walt Weiss has indicated he wants to use the DH spot to get guys half days. He wants to rotate players through and give guys days off. Pretty sure he said Matt Olson's kind of exempt from that. Olson's going to decide how much he wants to play pretty much himself. But the idea here is if you were to add a Byron Buxton or a Cody Bellinger, let's use those two guys that could cover all three defensive spots in the outfield. Does that help keep Ronald Acuna Jr. healthy? Does that give you insurance on Michael Harris? Would that addition have been more impactful than than all of the other additions that you made? So let's break down those scenarios. What would the roster look like if you added Buxton via trade? What would the roster have looked like had you signed Bellinger? Let's talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby. This will be it for the week. You'll have the weekend off. Definitely, my thought here is bowl games. There's going to be tons of entertaining, fun bowl games, I guess, to watch. I don't know if I call Penn State Clemson entertaining, but like Georgia Tech BYU should be really fun. Georgia Southern Appalachian State could be really entertaining as well. So anyway, if you want lines on all of these, you want action, all of that, FanDuel.com, download the FanDuel app to get started over there. You can refer a friend and get a bonus. So again, FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app. Okay, let's look at the scenarios, right? Let's look at the scenario of you trade for Buxton. Let's look at the scenario of signing Bellinger, because it's not just one or the other. You have Buxton or you don't. It's the choice you could have made versus what you would not have had you done this. So it's do what you did or trade for Buxton and what you gave up to get him, right? Or sign Bellinger and what you didn't do to pay Bellinger. It's not just a matter of taking the roster as is and adding Buxton or Bellinger to it. Buxtonger is the way we should just refer to both these guys together. All right, so trading for Buxton, he's not been traded, so it's hard to know, like, this is speculation, right? It's hard to know what exactly he would have been dealt for, but the common assumption from Twins beat writers, I spoke to one like a week or two ago, just in passing, is that they want young, controllable pitching in the deal, or they would have wanted that in the deal. They have a lot of high-level position player prospects on the way, especially in the infield, especially in the outfield. The outfield. So arms would have been the centerpiece. Again, the Braves lost all their top 6 starters on the IL last year, including 5 at the same time. They used 19 different starters last year. Now, 3 were relievers, right? 3 openers. But for the most part, 19 starters. So would trading away J.R. Ritchie and another high minors arm been the right way to go to get Buxton? And I say that from the perspective of it's not just 26. You have Buxton for a couple seasons. But Chris Sale, barring an extension, which I still expect is going to come, but barring an extension, he's done after this season. Ronaldo Lopez is done after 27. So you have to fill 2 rotation spots right there. Would removing J.R. Ritchie and another AAA starter, let's say Didier Fuentes, Blake Burkhalter, whatever, what does that do if you have a bunch of injuries in 26? But then also, what does that do if you don't get Sale and Lopez back after 27? You now have 2 less options to backfill your rotation. And then maybe you have to go spend money there. And that kind of ignores what if they want Bryce Elder for reliable back in the rotation innings? Again, he's not gone on the injured list in Atlanta. He's reliable for innings. I still think there's a little development there that Jeremy Hefner can do. We have a show probably on Monday coming about Hefner's newest interview. First interview he did publicly since being hired. He talked to CJ Nikowski on Sirius XM radio on Wednesday. I've got some of that coming. I think it was Wednesday, Tuesday or Wednesday. I've got some of that coming on Monday. Talk about that. We'll talk about Elder. We'll talk about Strider, some of that stuff. But you raise the ceiling by adding Buxton, assuming he stays healthy. But the floor of the rotation is lower because if you have injuries again, and it's almost guaranteed you're going to have injuries, the question's the extent. You have less rotation depth for this upcoming season. You have less rotation depth in the future when you have to start replacing guys. So that's the trade-off. It's getting Buxton, but having less options this year and less options in the future, less cost-controlled options in the future to replace Sale and Lopez. All right. Now let's ignore the trade thing. Let's say they sign Cody Bellinger. The crowdsourced projection on this is 5 years and $140 million, which is an average of $28 million a year. Adding Cody Bellinger likely means that money, that $28 million, is coming from the combination of Mike Yastrzemski and Ha-Seong Kim, who together are making $29 million this upcoming year. Now, Bellinger is obviously an upgrade on Yastrzemski, right? For the 2 years that Yaz has signed for. I do question Belly's fit when he doesn't have that short porch in New York. The Chop House is an appealing target. It's not the same as the short porch in New York. I don't necessarily like the idea of signing Bellinger for 5 years. Jake Mastriani and I debated that on his show like a month ago, and a lot of his listeners said that I won. But not having Ha-Seong Kim, I think, is the bigger loss there. Because Mauricio Dubon's biggest value by far is his defensive versatility. He can play every day. Like, he ended up doing some of that in Houston. But I do also think it's important to point out that since he started playing every day in Houston, his offensive performance dropped. In 2023, he hit 278 with a 720 OPS. It was a 97 OPS plus. Won a Gold Glove, utility Gold Glove. In 24, it dropped to a 269 average, a 657 OPS, which is an 87 OPS plus. Last year, it dropped to a 78 OPS plus. And in this scenario, where you sign Bellinger, you're asking Dubon to not only play every day at shortstop, but you're asking him to do it at the toughest infield position. Again, he can play anywhere at a high level. Last year, he played 206 innings at shortstop. In 24, he played 32. In 23, he played 78. The bulk of his innings have either been at second base or in the outfield. And in the outfield, it was left field, which is a shorter left field in Houston because of the Crawford boxes. So we didn't have necessarily any guarantee that his offense not only would hold up, but wouldn't get even worse if you had him playing on an everyday basis. Nick Allen had a 53 OPS plus last year. Even if Dubon had a 78, that's still an upgrade from Nick Allen. But here's the thing. Signing Bellinger and not having Yastrzemski and Kim means that Bellinger's offensive contribution not only needs to bridge the gap between what Ha-Seong Kim would have given you and what Mauricio Dubon would give you. And I'm a believer that as Kim gets farther away from his shoulder surgery, he's going to be closer to a 100 OPS plus. He had a 107 in 2023. I don't know if he gets back to that, but even being at a 100 would be a boost for Atlanta. Bellinger's offense in this scenario where you don't sign Yaz, you don't sign Dubon, Bellinger's offense would need to carry the gap between what Ha-Seong Kim would produce and what Mauricio Dubon would produce, but also the downgrade from Dubon as a starter, if he gets hurt, to whoever is the backup. We mentioned the bench earlier. It could be Brett Wisely. It could be It could be Vidal Brujan. Neither guy has hit in their careers. They're also not as good defenders as Nick Allen. So if Dubon were to get hurt in the scenario where you signed Bellinger, now you're in a situation where you're playing somebody who hits as poorly as Nick Allen and also is not as good a defender as Nick Allen. Is Bellinger's addition to the offense greater than that? It clearly is not. It doesn't override that gap. So instead of signing Bellinger and signing Kim, you're in a scenario where you now, one, get better performance on an everyday basis from shortstop, we're assuming. And then also, if you suffer an injury at shortstop, you're still getting what should hopefully be pretty decent performance from shortstop. And yes, the ceiling is lower. Atlanta's trying to hack that with adding, with doing the platoon thing, right? You can platoon Dubon and Yastrzemski, righties and lefties, and get OPS pluses of over 100 in both scenarios. Atlanta's trying to replicate the effect of adding somebody like Cody Bellinger without spending the money on the long-term deal for Cody Bellinger. I don't know, to me, the approach they took, right? Raising the floor instead of, fortifying the floor instead of pushing the ceiling makes the most sense with how the Braves have usually built the roster, right? That $22 million Atlanta max we always talk about kind of has the side effect of allowing the Braves to be deeper in the lineup, right? I think let's do this. Look in the division at the top 3 guys on each roster for your biggest competitors. Philly, Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, Trey Turner. New York, Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor, was Pete Alonso up until next year. It's hard to argue that those guys are not at least comparable, if not better, than Ronald Acuna Jr., Matt Olson, Austin Riley. It's really hard to argue that Schwarber, Harper, and Turner aren't roughly equivalent talents. And both Philly and New York have a shortstop as well. But, Atlanta doesn't have the advantage there, I don't think. But 4 through 6, look at Atlanta. You had Marcell Ozuna, now you have Drake Baldwin, Ozzie Albies, Michael Harris. Outside of last season, I know last season was tough. Outside of last season, you'd like that 4 through 6, right? Baldwin, Albies, Harris, Ozuna, whatever, better than something like Brandon Nimmo and Jeff McNeil, who were 5 and 6 for New York last year, or Edmundo Sosa and Bryson Stott, who were 5 and 6 on B-WAR for the Phillies last year. It's hard to argue that barring last season, I know it doesn't help me my point, but barring last season, you'd rather have Baldwin, Ozzie, and Harris over Sosa and Stott. Nimmo and McNeil did so well in New York that they traded both of them this winter. And so their 5 and 6 is right now some combination of Francisco Alvarez and Brett Beatty, right? Which is not exciting at all. Mark Vientos collapsed. It's New York's going through it right now. But it's hard to argue that Atlanta's depth is not better than these other teams because they have a bunch of highly paid stars and then a bunch of lower paid team control or budget acquisitions to fill out the roster. And Atlanta at least has quality performers in those spots because they have multiple guys making $22 million, right? I understand that pushing the ceiling, trading for a Buxton, signing a Bellinger is more fun and exciting. I get it. I do 130 or so post-game shows a year. It's a lot more fun to talk about a win than it is a loss. And if you have a bunch of superstars and they do superstar things, that is fun to talk about. I get it. But the last 2 seasons where Atlanta has had all of these injuries spread pretty evenly across everybody on the roster, but Matt Olson, and even he was nicked up late last year, it feels like this approach that they took, fortify the floor over pushing the ceiling, should be more successful. And here's the thing. Was it the right move or not is a question we answer now. You can't wait until the season happens to then say, oh, well, nobody got hurt in 26. So having Buxton would have been better than having both Yastrzemski and Kim, or having Bellinger would have been better than both Yastrzemski and Kim. You have to answer the question now. Based on the information we have right now, because that's when we made the decision, was fortifying the floor better than raising the ceiling. That's going to come down to your evaluation of how you feel about Austin Riley and Matt Olson and Ronald Acuna Jr. staying healthy and Ozzie Albies getting back to where he was from an offensive perspective. To me, I do think that one more star bat might not have been enough for the 2026 Atlanta Braves. I think that multiple pieces of depth can be the right move for the 2026 Atlanta Braves. I think it's the right decision. It's not as exciting or fun. I think depth was the right decision. What about you? I'm on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can email us, contact@bravestoday.com. I have a bunch of emails to respond to, by the way. I wrote a piece on Wednesday for the newsletter all about the business of Braves Today, right? The newsletter, the podcast, audio, video here on YouTube, as well as the written stuff, and how combined for all three of those, we had 1.5 million views, interactions in 2025. People clicking to read a newsletter, people clicking on to listen or watch a podcast. So for every single one of you who was part of that 1.5 million, which blows my mind, that's an insane number. For anybody who was part of that 1.5 million, thank you. I never could have imagined that this thing here that I do, this newsletter, this podcast, if you take all of that consumption of Braves Today, 1.55 million times, would sell out Truist Park over 38 times. If everybody who listened or watched a pod, if every time they did it, they were in the stadium, it would take 39 different dates to run through everybody. Blows my mind. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. I have a bunch of emails in my inbox after that. People with thoughts, with compliments, with questions. I got to get back to everybody. If you have one you want to add about today's topic or about the show in general, contact@bravestoday.com is my email. Again, I'm on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can hit me however you want to do, whatever's best for you. I have a lot of plans for 2026 as well. I want to make this better. I want to add more shows during the week. I want to do more things. I want to bring you more content in different ways, interviewing prospects and team personnel at the minor league affiliates, things like lots of stuff I have planned. Your support helps make that possible. Among the ways you can do that, subscribing, bravestoday.com, free or paid, definitely helps us there, as well as on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we drop an episode. On audio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, leave a 5-star review. Words of affirmation are always nice. I think only Apple lets you do that. And tell a friend. Tell a friend about bravestoday.com and the Braves Today podcast and how much you enjoy hearing me talk about giving every single pitcher a cutter. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.